How's it going, my WBE people? DrSlaking, the Slacking Doctor, back with the Shield Division weekly recap for Week 5. And unfortunately, for the first half of this recap, I am going to be on my own. My man Jacob, as always, my co-host, is recording the second half of this. I just want to quickly explain that is entirely my fault this week. Unfortunately, my house has just been a revolving door of guests, which is fantastic for me, but makes recording very, very difficult. And then my mum hasn't been very well recently as well, which made it even harder. So it's just been one thing after another, unfortunately. But so I will own up to that and completely apologise to you guys for us not being together. But we should be back together next week to record that. I know I saw the comments last week saying you prefer it when we are together, and we definitely want to record as much of it together as we can. So I want to apologise in advance. But regardless, we have some fantastic games this week in the Shield Division. I can't wait to talk to you about some of them. And I'm going to kick us right off with the game of the week this week, as Gator took on MV, the Florida Gators taking on the San Diego Chim Chargers. And this week, I did not really expect it to go this way, and I don't think a lot of the analysts did. Gator's team, as I've said numerous times in these recaps, on paper doesn't necessarily look the strongest. He did make a controversial trade with Joey Pokey-Aim for this week, trading his Zero Aura away for the Volcarona. It's a bit of a controversial trade because it was only for 1 week, and I know a lot of people felt that it was trying to gain an unfair advantage or something in these matchups. But from my kind of viewpoint, all of the coaches involved in these two games are likely to make playoffs regardless, and as MV pointed out in his video when he was discussing this match, he kept a lot of things hidden in his prep. He didn't over-prep for this match, particularly wanting to make sure he had some techs preserved for a potential playoff match against Gator. So with that in mind, I think actually as a neutral, as a fan, it kind of makes it more interesting that in playoffs we'll have a fresh matchup without Volcarona and Zero Aura. So that's kind of my piece on that. But yeah, I think a lot of us weren't expecting Gators to necessarily come out with a W here, and he actually brought kind of, I don't want to say a meme team, but definitely a heat team with one Zmon in Donphan and then 5 Choice Mons. I think it was Choice Scarf Archeops, Choice Specs Heatran, Z Donphan, as I said, Choice Specs Celebi, Choice Band Buffalant, and then I can't remember if it was Scarf or Specs Volcarona, because as it happened, that thing never even hit the field in this matchup. Instead, Gator was able to basically just break through with the Donphan in the late game, being able to Quake the Azumarill, being able to Z Earthquake into Ice Shard the Mega Sceptile for KOs there. Was able to break through the Heatran, Specs Heatran killing off Victini after that thing was broken down by Specs Celebi just Leaf Storming into it. And in general, just kind of didn't make any super aggro plays or any great reads or anything like that, but instead just really kind of fired off damage with all his Choice Mons, got hazards up early, and just broke down MV's team. So really, really interesting matchup here. I think that on paper, like I said, we weren't really expecting this, and MV did bring some good tech as well. He had the Phytanium Z Togekiss able to kill the Heatran, and in general, like, I think he got a little bit unlucky. He said in the end game when his Azumarill was killed by the Donphan, it was only a 12.5% roll to kill with the Donphan, but it has to be said, you know, in a sense, great prep by Gator for bringing the max speed Donphan to even give himself a chance of, you know, being able to kill the Azumarill in the first place. Yeah, definitely very interesting, and a tough matchup for MV to come up against this kind of heat team. I think the real turning point in the game, not necessarily turning point, but one of the most interesting talking points in the game, was when Gator just left his Celebi in on the Victini, repeatedly just clicking a Leaf Storm as MV switched hard into Victini, then went for Parrot Punch, then went for Bolt Strike, assuming that the Heatran would come in eventually, but instead Gator just carried on Leaf Storming and then actually revenged the Victini with the Heatran. So kind of one of those weird scenarios where MV's predicting the Heatran coming in, trying to kill it off, and in the end, actually, he ends up taking a lot of chip for his trouble and just getting revenged by the Heatran. So very weird scenario. And I guess this is what happens when Gator's just enjoying himself and just playing for fun. I know that MV has a pretty poor record against Gator and has continued here with the 2-0 defeat. I think both coaches will continue to win games this season. I don't think it's really going to have a big impact on the final standings for them, maybe seeding, but I expect both to make a good push for playoffs, and both have had fantastic seasons so far. Moving on to the second game I have for you, we have a bit of a more interesting game in terms of more serious sets, I guess, being brought, but a little bit more one-sided, as Cybertron and his Melbourne Rotons took on Faint Attacks and his Atlanta Umbreons. And in this game, I really felt like we got to see Cybertron at the peak of his powers. He's had a inconsistent season for me, I feel he's had ups and downs, but this game I really felt like he was in control, he was on the front foot the whole match, he was making smart doubles, smart reads, and just really beat Feint attacks down, and I don't even feel like Feint attacks can walk away from this game and feel disappointed with how he played, or be upset with how things went down, because it's not like he played badly, he brought good prep, he seemed to play decently well, it's just that Cybertron was in his element this week, and was really just, from the kind of the first turn, just in a good spot. The real clutch was when he switched in AV Conk on the Lantern, and it was Guts Conkelder, as the Lantern went for Scald, and that burnt the Conkelder. Then he went for the Poison Jab, predicting Feint attacks to switch out into his Gardevoir, and was able to just OHKO the Mega Gardevoir as it came in. And that really just put Feint attacks on the back foot, because every time Conkelder came in after that, it just got to click Drain Punch and do a numbered something. I think Feint attacks kind of made a big mistake by going into their Lantern to revenge kill the Conkelder. He went for the Volt Switch, and that just meant that the Conkelder could click Drain Punch on whatever came in, and heal back what little damage the Volt Switch did to it in the first place, and it gave him like another, I think, about 45% free chip on the Komodo. I'm not quite sure why Feint attacks went into Lantern to revenge killer. I thought he should have gone to Komodo first. I think it was Z Komodo, and he could have just bopped the Conkelder that way, or at least forced it back out again. So yeah, I definitely think it was just a little bit being flustered after the great read with the Poison Jab from Cybertron, just putting him on the back foot and maybe making some odd plays because of that. But from that point onwards, like I say, I just felt like Cybertron stayed on the front foot. He doubled around on the Entei after the Entei. He was predicting to go for Protect. He managed to switch out into the Rotom on that thing, and then predicting the Lantern to come in, he switched out again, back out into Mamoswine. Now, I did feel like Feint attacks could have stopped that by just going for another Protect, because the first turn he went for Protect when the Rotom came in. That doesn't count as an actual Protect, so it's not like going for a double where you have the 50-50 chance. He could have protected hard on the Rotom and seen what the Rotom wanted to lock itself into, or potentially scout for that double into Mamoswine, and that could have been a really good play on his part. But as it happens, it worked out perfectly for Cybertron. He got the Mamoswine in and was able to get his rocks up and just keep applying pressure the whole game. Once the Flygon eventually went down to final Gambit Aselgor, that meant Earthquake from Mamo was so free. So it was just a really, really smart way by Cybertron of freeing up his two kind of breakers. Conkelder's Drain Punch was free once he took out the guard, and Mamoswine's Earthquake was free once he took out the Flygon. So yeah, just really, really nice plays all around, and a good way of kind of breaking down your opponent's team. He used his Mega Slowbro much more effectively this week as a defensive pivot, bringing it in, taking some damage, and then regenning it off, switching out, not Mega Evolving straight away. I definitely thought he used that more effectively too, so I was impressed with that. Like I say, I don't feel like Feint attacks can be too disheartened this week. I think he did everything right, and I'm sure he'll bounce back next week. He just came up against a top-class opponent in top-class form, and it's hard to do anything in those kind of scenarios. Moving on to the next match, we saw Jodor and his Seattle Sea Kings taking on Patty Trills and his Sin City Scissors. And we actually got Jodor, speaking of coaches in fine form, a coach who hasn't had the best form this season, picking up his first win of the season, which is always fantastic to see. You never want to see someone go too long without a W, so it was really great to see Jodor pick up a win this week as he picked up the 4-0 victory over Patty Trills. I really felt like Patty Trills' prep again impressed me so much. He brought Hazard Stack Ferrothorn, he brought Refresh Seismitoad so that he could Toxically Synchronize Umbreon so that he could Toxic the Alomomola and doesn't mind being Toxic back. He really brought some great prep there. I thought that Refresh Seismitoad was some real heat. And contrary to Jodor's commentary, he did not bring Fizdef, Mega Alakazam. His Infernape had been intimidated. If any of you saw that, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But in general, I still thought Patty Trills' prep was on point. I think this time the execution of his game plan was just a little bit off. He got up his hazards really early with Ferrothorn and allowed Ferrothorn to go down to the SD Bisharp. And that, I think, put him in a really bad spot because Jodor has a phenomenal defogger in Sigilif. Sigilif is so fast, immune to all kinds of hazards, that it can almost guaranteed get a defog off in nearly every matchup. So whilst, yes, he was then able to pivot into his Primeape on the defog, because it was Choice Scarf Primeape, it had to lock itself into one move. It was far too early in the game for it to sweep, and so it really just put Patty in a position where he got one big hit off with Primeape in exchange for all his hazards, and I don't think that was worth it. I think the reason that he's been so good this season is because he's been able to keep his hazards up, and then he's been able to come in with Mega Alakazam in the late game and just clean up all the pieces that have been chipped down by all those layers of spikes, and potentially slowed down by Sticky Web as well. So yeah, I definitely felt like this week, when he was coming up against a bulky team with Alomomola, Sigilif, and Umbreon, I felt like he had to prioritize keeping that Ferrothorn around, keeping those hazards on the field as much as he could, and really just pressuring Jodor's switches like that. But that's not to take anything away from the way Jodor played. Joe played absolutely fantastically, using his defensive pivots in Alomomola and Umbreon superbly. He also brought in Infernape at the right time on the Rabombi to stop that thing from sweeping him in the late game. I don't think it would have done anyway because his Calm Mind Sigilif set seemed to shut it down, but it wasn't as reliable because, as he noted in his commentary, one crit could completely lose him that match. So once he realized that, he played around the Rabombi a little bit smarter later in the game, and in general I was really impressed. He got the Bishop T-waved early in the game, but then knew he had Heal Belt on Umbreon, and so could get rid of that, and so preserved his Bishop for the late game. As it happened, it never hit the field again, but I still think it was a really good play by him to keep that around for potential Mega Alakazam and things like that. The one bit of hacks that kind of happened in this game was Primeape missing a Stone Edge as the Slurpuff came in. As it happened, I think that was kind of irrelevant because the Citrus Berry into the Unburden boost would have given Slurpuff enough health and enough speed to kill the Primeape the next turn anyway, and as Patty did just stay into Stone Edge the next turn again, it basically ended up so that the Slurpuff, as if it had been hit on the switch-in, didn't really change too much at all there. So yeah, in general, very impressed by both coaches. I think that maybe Patty found himself in a matchup where his kind of hazard stack offense just wasn't as good as he wanted it to be, or he wasn't able to execute it as well as he normally is, and Jodor really capitalized with his bulk, being able to position himself very carefully in this game, and yeah, thoroughly impressed me picking up his first W of the season. And now moving into the final game that I have to commentate on here, or analyze here, and this one was extremely one-sided, as the Chicago Cubchews took on the Chicago Bouffalons, with Galactic Elliott taking on Sacred. And this, of course, was Sacred's final game, I believe, in the WBE for this season, as he did drop and has been replaced by, I think Uzi Gunner replaced him. Huge shout out to Uzi Gunner, one of the nicest people in the community, thoroughly deserving a shot in the WBE, and a really good analyst as well. It's great to see the analyst being rewarded with a spot like that, so very, very exciting stuff for all of us. But this was a very tough final game for Sacred here before he dropped, as turn 1, Scarf Serena lead from Elliott got a crit into the Mega Aerodactyl, OHKOing that thing. And I want to apologise if you can hear my dog. Usually my mum is able to keep my dog quiet while I'm recording these, but as I say, she's not very well at the minute, so sincerely apologise for my dog barking in the background, but let's not let that distract us. As I say, Scarf Serena was able to score a turn 1 crit and OHKO on the Mega Aerodactyl, which was just huge in this game. It completely changed the tide of the match. I think mentally it will really have put Sacred on the back foot. It's incredibly hard to bounce back from those kind of situations. However, I do think it's worth noting that Sacred kind of had great pivots into the Serena. He had the Amoonguss, he had even an Ordino, he had the Kyurem, he had the Arcanine. There were so many safe switch-ins to the Serena that I'm really not sure it was worth staying in and risking a potential Scarf Serena just doing that to him. Yeah, it should never have OHKO'd without the crit, but even the amount of chip that thing would have taken, I don't know if that exchange was ever worth it, especially running the risk of the crit, right? I don't know if that was necessarily the best decision there, just because of the sheer number of safe pivots defensively he had into the Serena. Regardless, it still was really, really tough, and it did put him on the back foot, as Gerda then came in on the Kyurem, which was able to sub up, knowing that Serena was scarfed into a grass move, but bulk up Gerda was a great bring by Elliott, and he was able to break the Kyurem substitute, and then 1v1 the Arcanine as well. I just basically punched that little hole in Sacred's team. Out came the Espeon to revenge kill the Gerda, and then eventually Elliott was able to position his Hooper against the Ordino, and that put him in a fantastic position. That's exactly what he wanted, because this Ordino, I don't think was quite built to be able to 1v1 the Hooper the way it should have been. I think it needed something like Toxic or T-Wave, just something to shut down a setup Hooper, because Elliott was able to get off 2 nasty plots, in fact maybe even 3 nasty plots, definitely at least 2, and then a Z-Trick, so it went to +4, +6 special attack, and +1 speed, outspeeding all of Sacred's team and being able to essentially OHKO all of them from that range. The only thing that could have dealt with it was maybe a Scarf Dazzling Gleam Espeon or a Sash Dazzling Gleam Espeon, but from the position it was in, it was always going to punch a big enough hole that I think Elliott was going to win from that point on, but it did pick up 4 kills and get the little mini sweep there, so definitely hugely impressive prep by Elliott. Can't take anything away from that. Being able to pull off a double dance superset like that is huge, very, very entertaining. But definitely a tough game for Sacred. And I'm just noticing on the slide here, I've put Ninetale Alola instead of Ninetales, so I apologize for that. And now, before I hand it over to my co-host, I just want to thank you all for last week's comments. A few people point out a couple of errors I made in the slides, which is always greatly appreciated. But also the positive discussion around Gators and Luke's game was fantastic to see. It was definitely a controversial game with the kind of debate around Toxic Stall and stuff, but the comment section on the last video were really, really positive, really constructive. Everyone was engaging in a good conversation, no matter which side of the fence they fell on. And I think as analysts, as people contributing to this WBE channel, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing how positive the WBE community is at the minute. It's just amazing, so thank you all for that so much. Now, without wasting any more of your time, I am going to pass over to my co-host, Jacob, as always.
Thanks for the introduction, co-host. You did really good in your end of the recap. Anyway, let's get started with my end and the 3 games I'm going to be covering. Let's first talk about the New York Noibats, coached by Mewtwo Fannate, taking on Gameboy Luke and his Bristol City Blazikens. Now, this was a pretty decisive win for Nate. It is his first win of the season. He defeated Luke 5-0, and he brought a really, really good team, and he played super, super well. And he was being a little bit too hard on himself in the middle of the game. He's like, oh, I don't think I played that well. The only sets that really worked was the Hydreigon. No, your team did pretty well overall. Sure, you could have played the Thundurus a little bit better, but hindsight's 50-50. Like, you're not always going to make the right play at all times. That's just Pokemon for us. And obviously, Luke just looked on the back foot for most of the match, and it just seemed like he couldn't get his footing in the match. And honestly, like, Nate just brought all the right sets, like Assault Vest Slowking to switch into the Primarina always and like just scout its item out was absolutely perfect, even if it didn't get poisoned. Even if it did get poisoned. But honestly, Slowking getting poisoned is never a bad thing because it has Regenerator. So even if you take a couple rounds of poison damage, like when you stay in, you just regen it all back. You get 2 rounds of poison would be like 18% because it's 6 and 12, and then you just regen 15%. You like gain 15% out of the exchange still, and you just poke at basically how Slowking and Slowbro work. They just kind of poke at your opponent and then just get Scald Burns or like they have so many coverage moves. It just works out so well. But Nate brought a really, really good Hydreigon set, and that really pressured Luke. Luke made a good play going in Aerodactyl, predicting the fire, scouting for the fire move from Hydreigon to see if he had it. But he didn't. He did have it, but he clicked Charge Beam instead, which was a good play on Nate's part because why would he stay in with Scizor ever? Like, I guess I think the better play probably would have been going into his Scarf Landorus because you instantly can do damage back to it with either U-turn or Superpower or whatever you would have had. I don't think he had. He might have had Superpower. I don't remember. I did watch Luke's team builder at the beginning just to see his team, so I have a grasp of what he all brought. But yeah, he probably should have gone to Landorus scouting for that rather than Arrow because that put him into a really disadvantageous position during the battle, so that was unfortunate. But honestly, that Hydreigon set literally broke down Luke's team so fast, and having Steelix there, like Steelix is probably should come most weeks for Nate. The only reason I say that is because I don't know. I know he made a transaction, but I don't remember if he brought and picked up another Stealth Rock user. He may or may not have. Unfortunately, I can't remember. But Steelix is pretty much can get rocks up every single week, and especially having something like Sylveon as a Wish Passer and then Slowking as like just a pivot into like, because Slowking and Steelix, Mega Steelix work so well together because they match each other's weaknesses pretty well. Like Steelix can take all the things that Slowking doesn't want to do, and Slowking can deal with all this stuff Steelix doesn't really want to do. So those two as a nice, and then as well as Sylveon as a nice defensive core that works really, really well for most teams, I'd say. So Nate got his first W of the season, played super well. And honestly, like, Lucario set worked out to perfection as well. I guess for Luke, for the future, just, like, like, think about your play. Obviously, it's good to scout for your plays, but just make sure to fully scout and think over the plays. Is this my most optimal switch here? Is this the best middle ground play? Rather than, oh, I resist fire moves. He's got a fire move. He's going to click it. Just because something resists doesn't necessarily mean it's your best play. I guess we wanted to get rocks up there too, but I know Hydreigon doesn't commonly carry charge beam, but sometimes it just happens out to work that way, etc., etc. But anyway, that is that game. Next, let's talk about Kyle A and the Miami Dolphins taking on the Maryland Terrapins in Under the Radar. Now, this game was kind of hampered a little bit by hacks, or there's a lot of hacks in it, and you could genuinely tell that Kelly felt awful about it, which I don't blame him because it's hacks, and you don't want to win that way. You don't want to win by hacks a lot of the time, or at all, period, exclamation point. But Kelly still brought a really, really solid team to this match. He brought Stealing the Arbok, he brought Abandoned Zygarde because it just broke down Kyle's team and basically got a kill. He brought a really cool Mega Sableye set with Punishment, Calm Mind, Dark Pulse, and just Recover. I believe that was so he could pretty much 1v1 Cresselia in case he set up alongside it, so that really worked. I believe that's what he said. If not, I don't remember, but Mega Sableye working together with Arbok in case he brought Cresselia worked out pretty well in that regard, I'd say. And honestly, Kelly really, the changes he made to his team really, really helps him because Mega Sableye like basically says, I don't really care about hazards anymore, or like status moves or anything as soon as it's Mega Evolved. And then Arbok's is like, I don't care about Toxic Spikes. And Kyle actually did bring Toxic Spikes on the Sableye. Kyle made a really good play at the beginning of the battle too, like turn 1 predicting Respirate just to click Toxic. That was really good because he knew that Kelly was not going to stay in there because Arbok would have gotten no code by the Earth Power more than likely, unless because he wasn't bulky at all. He didn't have any investment. Or I think he had like 60 HP or something like that. Maybe something like that. But he wasn't very bulky. So honestly, like that was a no drawback play by Kyle. He didn't lose anything by that. But yeah, as the game progressed, Arbok came in after Mesprit U-turned on the Diancie and then clicked Steel MZ. So gets a kill right there. Okay. Here's where the fun begins. Kyle brings in Volcanion, which potentially could have been Choice Scarf because I think he's brought Choice Scarf Volcanion like a couple times this season already, so it could have been. But Kelly's like, I just want the damage because it's going to be really important for later in the game, which it would have been, and he crits him with an Earthquake because he wanted to gain the knowledge of whether or not it was Choice Scarf or not, and that was important. And it wasn't, but he got crit by the Earthquake. Okay, that stinks. Then I believe Kyle brings his Pelipper in, and then he pivots into his Kingdra because his Pelipper was indeed Choice Scarf. Revealed later in the game when it outspent Alolan Raichu. But then he brings his Kingdra in as Kelly makes the right play and goes for a Thunder Fang, because why would you not try to attack Pelipper? Normally it's Damp Rock, normally it's not Scarfed or anything. You've got nothing to lose, and plus you live any hit, and I think unless it's like Modest Hydro Pump or something, you probably wouldn't have lived that. But most hits you live, so may as well attack it. No drawback play. And he gets a paralysis on Kingdra, so that's unfortunate. But then the next turn, obviously Kingdra would still outspeed in the rain, because even though your speed's cut in half with Paralysis, Kingdra just naturally outspeeds Kingdra. So, funnily enough, gets a fully paralyzed Kingdra 2 times in a row, allowing Arbok to knock out the Kingdra. So that's like big yikes. That's just Kyle. It was bad. It was just a very hacksy game. So Kyle really didn't get a chance to do too much, unfortunately. Kyle brought some fun sets like the Scarf Pelipper. That was fun. Didn't really get to see what the Kingdra was capable of. Maybe it was specs, maybe it was physical. No, the world will never know. It's just like how many licks does it take to get the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? Only the owl knows. But anyway, there's a lot about this game that was fun. Besides the hacks, like it should have been a lot more. It should have been a lot back and forth. I feel like the game would have been a lot more back and forth had the hacks not happened, so it was super unfortunate. But, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about this, because hacks kind of hindered it, and it would have probably been a really enjoyable game to watch without that. But anyway, let's get onwards to the last battle of the recap, and we're going to be talking about Old Man Tup and the Pittsburgh Paraditas taking on Leo, head coach of the Durham Druddigons. So basically, this game was uploaded a little bit late, which unfortunate, but understandable. If I could ever talk, I'm sorry, sue me. But yeah, basically, it was interesting to see that why Tuck didn't bring Mega Charizard X versus Leo, because Leo in his team builder stated how if he just gets to +2/+2, he loses the game, which essentially Leo did do that. Like, Leo brought the right team in order to beat it. I guess the only thing he could have brought was like a Focus Sash Reuniclus to not get swept by Charizard X, but there really wasn't much counterplay to that. He did its right by respecting Zard X, bringing the Scarf Durant with Rock Slide, so that was really good. But there really wasn't a whole lot Leo could have done. He brought Akaberry Steelix, which that was a correct bring as well, because that probably lived a +1 hit. Any +1 hit, that would make sense in my head. I believe that's what it was for. And then he brought a little bit of offense in it. And he brought Explosion, Earthquake, Rocks, and I don't remember the last move, honestly. But it's a very interesting team. Top brought like Scarfed Rose Raid and everything. Leo ended up winning 2-0. There were some hacks, I believe, that went into Tup's favor because the Reuniclus missed 2 Focus Blasts on the Tyranitar that the Chople Berry was already popped. So that's super unfortunate. That happened like mid-game. And that really gave the edge to Tup a little bit in that instance because you missed 2 Focus Blasts, and Reuniclus probably could have just won the game at that point, and there really wasn't a whole lot that Tup could have done about it. Like, sure, I mean, it could... Hold on, my computer's being all whack. Tup could have pulled it back a little bit, but Tup still almost won with Scarfed Rose Raid in the end, and then unfortunately, his Durant got in and just cleaned up the game and then killed the Rose Raid, and getting the 2-0 victory in Leo's favor against Tup. Honestly, it was more of a back and forth game. The hacks is unfortunate. Like, it seems like this week there was quite a bit of hacks, at least in the games I watched. I am so looking forward to next week, where hopefully DrSlaking and I can work together and actually do the recap together for once, because it's kind of getting annoying where we can never do this together because we want to record together and all that stuff. But don't you worry, in a couple weeks, I assure you, we will be always recording together. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to reveal anything, but anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day. We'll catch you all later and see you next week for the Shield Division recap. Take care, and make sure to check out all the coaches and the analysts in the description down below. And congratulations to you, Automathic and the Uzi Gunner, for getting promoted or getting spots in the league, because unfortunately some coaches had to leave. Thanks for watching. Take care. Peace.